Okay.
We are live. We are live, Beena.
Okay. Hello and welcome to Moreness-Culture. Good morning, Syl. Good
Yeah.
morning, Grain.
Good morning.
Good morning, and good mornings to everyone who is going to join us live and will watch us recorded later. You all are most welcome to this Moreness space, this free space, this Moreness-Culture, where you can be not only yourself, but also you can aspire to be more. You can get value. And this is a place where you can get value no matter you agree or disagree, you believe or don't believe in. No. If you feel that, okay, this is something resonates with me, you don't need anything. But the only thing you need is to have this understanding and willingness to learn and grow. That's all. You don't need to believe on anything. You don't need to agree with anything. Still, you can get value. And this is what we were discussing before. Nowadays, we are getting a bit inconsistent with our lives, which is going to resolve soon. Hopefully, we will be more regular, but it is again coming as appropriate. So last time what we were discussing about that we are busy for any newcomer, and of course people who are regularly here, what we are busy with, we are doing capital R reading of Carlos Castaneda's books about Don Juan, and with the very specific intent to connect with Don Juan, to connect with his intent, to connect with the bigger picture, to get value of his capital S sharing. Normal sharing, yes, but his capital S sharing. We want to get capital V value of his capital S sharing. And this is the intent we have, of course, to connect with the universal intent also at that time and all those things. Well, I was sharing about that with the mediums, like, okay, he is sharing so far, and we just finished book 2. And in book 1 and book 2, especially in book 1, there was something new about like the medicine plants, and so wonderful. I truly respect that, because it needs a lot of persistence, it needs a lot of thoroughness, it needs a lot of willingness and keenness to explore what these plants can do, more than just being a plant and being beneficial for human beings in a regular way, like just providing oxygen and beauty and comfort, but to explore more, which was not obvious. It's a big, huge deal. Our intent is to, yes, learn about, know about what these medicinal plants were doing and how Don Juan was sharing. But the basic intent is to connect with Don Juan's intent when he was exploring different mediums. Again, by medium, I mean different ways of,
or using them rather than
extracting
exploring,
them.
right?
Yes.
Using
Yes.
them, yeah. Because he already
Yes.
knows them, he doesn't really need to explore. But he's
Okay. What
exploring
I'm
the
saying,
effect on Carlos. Yeah.
exactly. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is something that I just want to connect with his eagerness, his willingness for exploring, extracting moreness. This is what we were
Yeah.
doing, and this
Yeah.
is what we want to connect
Yeah.
with. Again, not negating any value for those ways he was using at that time, but
Right.
again, we have very, very strong trust, capital T trust, that Don Juan is, and of course Don Gennaro, and people like them. They are much more than those things, those ways of exploring oneness, because they have explored all those things. So our intent is to connect with their moreness in an abstract form also, without getting involved into, not necessarily, sometimes yes, I want to explore that, okay, yes, I want to connect with this, all those things, but without getting stuck into the mundane, without getting stuck into the specifics. We want to connect with the abstract.
Yeah.
We want to connect with the intent, so we can also
Yes.
become able or be able to explore new ways. explore new ways. Like, okay, yes, they were using plants, which is profound. Again, in this whole culture, I'm using Don Juan and Don Gennaro because these two names I know. But of course, it's a legacy. It's a whole world out there. So for me, when I'm saying Don Juan or Don Gennaro, I mean the whole legacy. So it's again, it is not as specific. It's
Yeah.
sometimes it's a lack of vocabulary, limitations of language. Especially for me, it happens like that. But when I'm saying that, my intent is to actually connect with the whole legacy. And of course, for us,
Yes.
this
All of it.
is
All of it.
this is this is the way for us. This is the way to give due respect to that legacy, to that culture, to that moreness, to that intent. This is what we are doing. This is our way of appreciating them. We always, very firmly, we trust that Don Juan, Don Gennaro, and the whole legacy was not limited to any specifics. They were more.
Correct. What they are focused on and phenomenal practitioners of is
Yes.
appropriateness.
Exactly. Yes.
That's, if I summarize everything that you've been saying, one term, one concept. Yes, one concept to rule them all. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly,
And
Deepak.
that is appropriateness. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, and we are trying our best to appreciate, capital
Yeah.
A, appreciate their intent, of course, their
Yeah.
willingness, their openness, their sharing, everything we want to appreciate. And also,
Yeah.
because of way of impactability, we want to pay due respect to everything.
Yes. Let me quote the whole rhyme there. One concept to rule
Yes.
them all, one concept to find them, one concept to bring them all, and in the unawareness find them.
Hmm. Oh,
Yeah, I'll read it again. One concept to
yes.
rule them all, one concept to find them, one concept to bring them all, and in the unawareness find them.
Hmm.
Perspectives on
Hmm.
appropriateness from Tales,
Yes.
Myths, and Fables of the New Nobility. Very profound.
Yes.
And in
Yes.
the
Yes.
unawareness, bind them. Yes. And to find them. So if you start with appropriateness,
Yes.
it doesn't just, it's not just the apex conception. Everything follows from that. But also, if you're focusing on appropriateness, you'll bring things to you. You'll find them and you will bind them, right? You'll bind them together in sensibility. Yeah. Because you'll have what's most appropriate, which is taking care of your soul, your spirit, your freedom. Yeah. And then everything follows from that. See? Your goals, your
Yes.
purposes, your intents. And that's what Don Juan and them were doing. Yeah. Very powerful. Very powerful. Magically, wonderfully,
Yes.
awesomely powerful. Potent stuff. Potent
Yes.
stuff. So it's good to be aware of. All right. So today is an exciting day. And I was Beena talking about appropriateness. It's very cool because we are starting again, as it were, with Carlos. We're going to see this in a moment, yeah. And we are on book
Yes.
3, which really is book 1, as you're going to see in a sense,
Wow.
yeah. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. It's very powerful and very potent, yeah. So I sent invites to everybody. You know, you can when you share, you can share to people, share like on Messenger, right? So I shared the link on Messenger. I don't know who's online and who isn't, but we will hope that some are. And if they come, then that'd be great because I want to. What's going to happen, Beena, by the way, is Carlos is going to reshare his introduction. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
which is which is rather interesting. Um, you know, so we're going to hear the whole story of his uh, first meeting with Don Juan there in the Nogales bus station, which I've been to. Um, he is going to share that again, right? It's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting indeed. So you get to hear the same story, but because he's telling it again, it's slightly different. Just the way things are, it doesn't mean the facts have changed. It's just how we relate, how we remember stuff, and so on, right? There's always a bit of variation involved. So it's interesting to hear. Very interesting to hear. All right. I was trying to get TikTok going, but I don't know what's up with TikTok. It's the weirdest thing. Who knows? Who knows? Okay. And let's get to the story. Very exciting. Very exciting. Very exciting. Just pulling up the file. But what Beena said about appropriateness, right, Beena, that Don
Yes.
Juan and Don Gennaro are absolute wizards when it comes to appropriateness. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Everything they do is appropriate. And we mustn't lose sight of the fact that this is what they're applying. Now, uh, neither or Carlos ever uses this concept appropriately, right? As a philosophical conception, as a philosophy, as a way of living, as a focal point. This is my contribution to philosophy, psychology, self-living, personal development, character development, etc. Appropriateness. It's not anywhere that I've ever seen, and I read all the classics once upon a time, right? You don't find it in any of the religious scriptures, not as a conception. And yet we know it all, which is quite fascinating, We're always being told as children, that's inappropriate, don't do that. Yeah. We were never told what is appropriate, right? And certainly not appropriateness in the context of life. Yeah, that was never a factor. We were never shared what is appropriate in life, what to do with yourself, how to live, how to be, etc. Yeah, and that's what
Yes.
Moreness-Culture is all about. Yeah, it is life appropriateness. That's what it is about. Yes, and when you're talking
Yes.
about life, it's not just your doings with other people, but your own life, soul appropriateness, spirit appropriateness, however you want to think, freedom appropriateness. Yes. So we're looking to absolutely maximize in any possible way, and it's quite a magical,
Mm.
marvelous thing, is it not, Veena? And I
Oh,
wanted to
yes.
say though, when looking at the actions of Don Juan and Don Gennaro, do not forget they are specific to Carlos. They are specific to Carlos. Carlos, as we have already seen, is an anomaly. And both
Mm.
Don Juan and Don Gennaro are very puzzled by Carlos. He doesn't conform to the usual understandings of apprentices or anybody. He just boggles their minds. So they have to do different things with him. But now, if you're not keeping appropriateness in mind, you see these activities and you assume that this is what an apprentice happens to an apprentice. Wherever did Don Juan or Don Gennaro or later any of the other members of the party, wherever do they say this is what's done with all apprentices when they're talking about the
No.
specific thing? No,
No.
no, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
Don Juan says, yeah, but that's the rule. Those instances, yes, but not on the other things, right? He never says that all apprentices have to go through this. Sometimes, but we have to be very careful and pay attention when he does and when he doesn't, right? And furthermore,
Mm.
just because that all apprentices get done this doesn't mean that it's the same for each. Later, we'll see it's absolutely not the same for each, as we'd expect, right? People aren't the same. And this is, we tend to want to rulify everything and want to insist that we're all the same, and we're not. It's not. I mean, this is just such a myth, the similarity of people. So you can't infer, in other words, that Don Juan's uh, uh, means, his techniques that he applies are so for everybody. No, they are Carlos specific, and that's very important. And we get to see the whole range, which is fantastic. At least we get to see a lot. We don't know if it's the whole range, but it seems like it's at least the majority of it. We must pick and choose from that what's going to work for us. Yeah. Very important. Right, Beena? Pick and choose what
Yes,
works for us. All right,
exactly.
let's get going here. Let's get going here. All right, brilliant. We're all done. We're all ready, and just need to screen share. I was going to say there's something that I need to do. There we go. All right, all right. Very exciting. Very exciting. Look where we're at. Part 2, Journey to Ixtlan. Oh, I need to be at part 1. Page 135, 136, and the wrong page, 135. No, it's not where I want either. How many 136s are there? 2, 5, 1. The book, it keeps my my page, except when I reboot, then it tends to mess things up. Now I lost my space. Then I have to find where I'm at. Come on now.
Mm.
Now the search is working. Ah, lost this. Catalina. Part 1. Oh, this is in book 2 now. Hey. I just have to manually scroll. Sorry. Hang on. I don't know why the search doesn't want to work. Oh, no, I don't know where we are now. Thought we were on, sorry, 135, not 136. Come on. This is much later again. What's going on? Giving people time to join. Giving people time to join. So just watch for the comments there, please.
Okay.
You know, maybe they a little slow in seeing them or something. No, it's not. It's not going to the thing. There we go. I think. No, it's still book 1. Yeah. Why? There we go. Journey to Ixtlan. Carlos Castaneda. Book, 3rd book in the series. And we went over the index. You see that he calls it an index, not a table of contents. That's Carlos's intellectual side. So part 1, right? Stopping the world. But we're going to do the introduction first, and we'll get to this, right? But see, that's the point of it. Stopping and then the journey to Ixtlan, right? As part 2, which is rather interesting. Right? There's nuance here. We don't really know what journey to Ixtlan means yet, but we're going to see what it means. All right. But part 1 is stopping the world. So we had perceiving. It was the preliminaries of perceiving, and then the task of perceiving. That was the 2 main sections of the 2nd book. That was it. There were no individual sections like this, right? And these are its conceptions. So here we have the start of a dictionary of power. Now, it's not ever mentioned that way, but these are very powerful conceptions. You're going to see, and there's more of them, and we have our own that we add. I've taken this idea, which wasn't presented in this way, but to me, it was very powerful as a tool. Because if you really want to learn, if you build these conceptions into your language, that's how you know them. Right? When you are able to use something as a vocabulary, unless you're BSing, but then you know it. Otherwise, you can't put it into your vocabulary. Then you're just talking nonsense, right? And that's the way to
Exactly.
know it. Yeah? Yeah. Very, very
Hmm.
powerful mechanism. So we're going to probably just get through the introduction today, but if not, we'll see. But just keep in mind that this is Carlos has now engaged in perceiving. We can't say he's learnt it yet, but also keep in mind that that was in 1969, 1970, where he was busy with the perceiving. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning,
Hmm.
1960. So perceiving is not an issue here yet. Stopping the world is, but the two go together, as we'll see, right? So this is the task, stopping the world. All right, let's go back. Uh, can you read, Beena? Do you want to read?
Oh, yes, I can read. Okay.
Okay.
Carlos Castaneda, Journey to
Ixtlan.
Ixtlan. Yes,
Ixtlan,
Ixtlan.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Carlos Castaneda, Journey to Ixtlan. Introduction. On Saturday, 22nd May 1971, I went to Sonora, Mexico, to see Don Juan Matus, a Yaqui Indian
Matus, yeah.
sorcerer. Matus, a Yaqui Indian sorcerer,
I would
with
assume.
whom I had been. Sorry?
I say I'm assuming Don Juan
Okay.
Matus.
Okay. Okay. A Yaqui Indian sorcerer with whom I had been associated since 1961. I thought that my visit on that day was going to be in no way different from the scores of times I had gone to see him in the 10 years I had been his apprentice. The events that took place on that day and on the following days, however, were momentous to me. On that occasion, my apprenticeship came to an end. This was not an arbitrary withdrawal on my part, but a bona fide termination. I have already presented the case of my apprenticeship in two previous works, The Teachings of Don Juan and A Separate Reality. My basic assumption in this book has been that the
Hang on,
articulation.
I'll read that again.
My basic assumption in both book has been that the articulation points in learning to be a sorcerer were the states of non-ordinary reality produced by the ingestion of psychotropic plants.
All right, that's
In,
very important. Read that sentence again,
yes,
please.
yes, okay. My basic assumption in both books has been that the articulation points in learning to be a sorcerer were the states of non-ordinary reality produced by the ingestion of psychotropic plants.
Okay, let's just digest this, because what is an articulation point? Seriously, Carlos, I mean, it's just intellectual speak, really. Come on, man, you should be past this by now already. I think this was published in 1973, right? Anyway, I mean, the key point he's saying is that he had assumed that the core technique for getting to be a sorcerer was the use of psychotropic plants, power plants. Yeah, my basic assumptions. Yeah, and now
Yes.
but inherent in that, Carlos is not saying I was mistaken, but that's why he's making that. My basic assumptions, right? He doesn't say, but my basic assumption was incorrect. Maybe he's going to get to this later on. Let's hope so. But it's very important to understand that was his assumption. So at least from that sentence, we can take that it wasn't a fact; it was just an assumption, right? Okay.
Yes.
So please continue.
Yes. 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 Wow. In this respect, Don Juan was an expert in the use of three such plants: Datura inoxia, commonly known as Jimson weed; Lophophora williamsi,
William
Williamsi,
Sai.
Williamsi. Oh yes, sorry, yes, yeah, Lophophora williamsi, known as peyote, and hallucinogenic mushroom of the Genus.
Genus, yeah.
Genus? Okay.
Yeah,
Psilocybe.
psilocybin. Yeah.
Yeah, psilocybe. My perception of the world thought the effects of those psychotropics had been so bizarre and impressive that I was forced to assume that such states were the only avenue to communicating and learning what Don Juan was attempting to teach me. Wow.
Read the next
Wow.
sentence. Read the next sentence twice.
Oh, yes. My perception of the
No, no, no,
world.
the next sentence. The next sentence.
Okay.
Read the next sentence twice.
Okay. That assumption was erroneous.
Erroneous. That
Assumption
assumption
was
was erroneous.
erroneous.
Error. Erroneous. Wrong.
Yes.
Wrong. Yes.
Wow.
So I want to. Hey, Joseph is here.
Okay.
Mathus, not Mathus. Oh, the T is pronounced as a TH. Ah,
Oh, okay.
interesting.
Mathus. Oh, then
Mathus.
it
All
is
right.
Mathus. Okay.
Yeah, that's what he says. Mathus. He wrote it phonetically. Thank you, Joseph. Ah, good to see you here, man. Good to see you. I'm excited
Thank
because
you.
this is we are starting again. And yeah, this point where Carlos is saying that assumption was erroneous. The assumption, right? I'll read this again. My perception of the world through the effects of those psychotropics had been so bizarre and impressive that I was forced to assume that such states were the only avenue to communicating and learning what Don Juan was attempting to teach me. That assumption was erroneous. This is huge, huge, because, and I'm emphasizing this like crazy, because to me it was always obvious. When I read it the very first time, way back in the early 1980s, and and subsequently. But unfortunately, as I was saying earlier, we tend to assume too much, and the same mistake Carlos falls into. Most people everybody I've ever known who have read these books, all assume the same, and they don't update when they get to this point. Maybe by that time they don't read the introduction because people tend to skip the introductions. But it is a critical point to not to understand that this is not the only way. It is a way, right? Very, very important. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So please continue, Beena. Please continue.
This is
I'm glad
so
to hear,
huge.
Joseph. Very good. It's
Oh, this
huge.
is
It
so
is huge.
huge
It
for
is
me.
huge. It is huge. Yeah, yeah. Big deal.
Yes. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I was
Yes.
forced to assume that such states were the only avenue to communicating and learning what Don Juan was attempting to teach me. That assumption was erroneous. Now we also have an interesting thing, right? That Carlos is shifting his understanding of what exactly is Don Juan attempting to teach him. It's implied here, and we're applying capital R reading here. This is me taking my perception skills and applying them here. It's not stated directly, but if all right, maybe I'm bringing a little bit of extra, but to me there's an implication here because he's never
Mm.
really specified what Don Juan is attempting to teach him. Yeah, his idea is apprentice and he's a sorcerer's apprentice. That was the idea, to be a sorcerer. But he's starting to realize, no, being a sorcerer is not the end goal, because in the previous book Don Juan said so. He said that, you know, if you learn to perceive compared to somebody who perceives, a sorcerer is a sad fellow. Well, by
Oh,
implication, if you say that, then sorcery can't be the end goal. Don Juan has not yet said what is the point and purpose of being an apprentice. Never specified this. Carlos just assumed it is to be a sorcerer. But in this declaration here, there's the implication, right? Because he said the only avenue. Well, if sorcery is an avenue, or at least the psychotropic plants is an avenue, well, then maybe what I thought, because those take you to sorcery. But if there are other avenues and they don't involve, see, just by implication. All right, that assumption, yeah. Joseph says, however, a point that is easy to forget in this discussion is that the use of the plant medicines is the only way to commune with the plant spirits and learn what the plant spirits have to share, independent of what he's learning with Don Juan. Yes, but communicating with the plant spirits isn't necessarily the only avenue to get to the end goal. That's the point. Plant medicine may be the only way of getting to the plant spirits, but the plant spirits aren't the only way of getting to where Don Juan is going. That's the point. Yeah, so we have to be very discerning here. We have to be very clear. Sure, it's the only way to get to the plant spirits, but doesn't necessarily mean that the plant spirits are the only way to get to where you want to go. It's not, as we are going to see. It is not, right? It's very important to understand. Now, otherwise, you fall into this trap again, Joseph. And I feel that we have to be very cautious of this, because it is an assumption that this is the only route, and it's not. Absolutely not. This is very clear, right? And by the way, there are actually instances of Carlos connecting to the plant spirits, particularly Mescalito, without actually ingesting the plant. Ingesting, Don Juan calls it Mescalito. He calls peyote Mescalito. But, we'll separate it out like Carlos does. I don't like to, because to Don Juan, and I like the way Don Juan does it. For him, peyote and Mescalito are two different things. And when you cultivate peyote artificially, not in the wild, you do not get the psychotropic effects. It's very fascinating. It's really fascinating. Anyway, I mean, Carlos just walked through the field and he had the experience, right? So just saying, it's not, to me, it's not necessarily the only way to connect to the plant spirits. Yeah. Certainly other ways are more scarce and rare and not to be relied upon, but it's definitely a reliable method, yes, but not strictly speaking necessary. You could say yes, but if you hadn't had the connection before, but anyway, it doesn't matter though, because it's not the only way to get to the end point, and that's the key point. Yes. So plant medicine is powerful for what it is, but we are looking at appropriateness in the overall, the total, right? And we haven't yet come to where that end goal has been delineated, has been clarified, has been expressed, right? So we'll get there, right? That assumption was erroneous. All right, but please continue, Beena.
Okay. For the purposes of avoiding any misunderstandings about my work with Don Juan, I would like to clarify the following issues at this point. So far, I have made no attempt whatsoever to place Don Juan in a cultural milieu. Yes, milieu. The fact that he considers himself to be a Yaqui Indian does not mean that his knowledge of sorcery is known to or practiced by the Yaqui Indians in general.
Sorry, that's an important point also. I mean, I mentioned this before, obviously. Again, Carlos is doing a bit of backpedaling in a very diplomatic way. He doesn't want to say, I was an idiot and made a mistake and called the first book a yucky way of knowledge. It's not. And he got into trouble in the press and, with reviews and all of this stuff, right? And people gave him a hard time for his foolish assumption, right? And I think a lot of Yaquis, I don't remember this specifically, but were from, just a general understanding that people thought Yaquis were all sorcerers. And obviously that's not so, right? And cause trouble for the Yaquis. So he has to clarify this. He's trying to set the record straight because of his erroneous assumption, right? Which is an unfortunate assumption because it caused a lot of problems. And not only just with Yaquis, but also relative to Native Americans in general. I don't know if you remember this, Joseph, but where there was a time where, when I started reading, it was still around, but in the 70s, in other words, especially in the later part of the 70s, because in 73 he was on the cover of Time magazine, so he was very popular, was a big deal. But then as the later books came out, people changed, and there was a big backlash at some point, because of the church people started, because it got to be popular, and then it came into the awareness of the church people, right? And now it's like sorcery and the devil and all of this stuff, right? Evil and black magic and all this. And so as a result, because of this association, uh, this erroneous association with Yaquis, and it's a Yaqui way of knowledge, it was also assumed later that, well, it's a Native American thing, an Indian thing, yeah? And that
Hmm.
caused a lot of problems, right? This association between the two, again, sorcery and the plant medicines are not the only avenues. And this book is setting that straight now to say there are other ways that, and it's about something else. Because Carlos got into a lot of trouble, right? Now, already, I would assume there was trouble at this point already. I don't know of it that far back. It's a little before my time, but I certainly know of it later on. And you can go back and you can look things up and you see that. So Carlos is looking to set this balance right, yeah. Which is probably why, because this is now he's writing this before he was on the cover of Time magazine. He got to be on the cover of Time magazine because of this book, yeah. This was published in the same time. So, all right. Please continue, Beena. Very important, right? So this where we were last year. And sorcery
Okay,
is known, right? Yeah.
all the conversations that Don Juan and I have had throughout the apprenticeship were conducted in Spanish. And only
Mm.
because of his thorough command of that language was I capable of obtaining complex explanations of his system of beliefs.
All
Okay.
right. So very important here. This
Yeah.
usage of Spanish. Yes. Don
Yes.
Juan, and because of his thorough command of that language. And Don Juan has mentioned, sorry, Carlos has mentioned it before, that Don Juan was exceptional in his command of the language. This
Hmm.
command of a language is a very, very important thing. Beena, what language do you think in now?
English.
This is an
That's simple.
exceptional thing. Why?
Yes.
Because we have focused on conceptions and conceptionality, an alternate name for
Exactly.
way of impeccability. What we do is the language of conceptionality, and we're going to see how potent and how important that is. My understanding of psychology, which is a very in-depth, very comprehensive understanding. I have my own psychology that I've developed. Yes, a lot of overlaps with others, but this understanding of conceptuality and emphasis, it's something I've always had. And the neurological studies are confirming my understanding of psychology, right? But basically through neurology, which isn't a psychological study, it's a physical science study, right? Anyway, but this language of conceptuality is very important. And I mentioned this, and Carlos is mentioning that Don Juan's thorough command of Spanish and the conversations in Spanish, it implies that the cultural part of Don Juan, the fact that he happens to be a Yaqui Indian sorcerer, it is a happens to be. They're talking in Spanish. Somewhere Don Juan had to learn that Spanish. The conceptuality that he is sharing is in Spanish, not in Yaqui or in some other Native American language. It's in Spanish, right? So the Spanish is now a language that is where the conceptuality comes from. And when you understand how conceptuality is converted to the brain, we really understand something, right? And also we see that doesn't have any Spanish origin as in Spain. No? Yes, Spain is a language,
Hmm.
Spanish is a language used in Mexico, but
Hmm.
there's not a cultural history of these things, right? When we talked about that, for instance, when we go back to the index, yes, and
Hmm.
we're talking about death as an advisor or erasing personal history. These are not Spanish or European conceptions, reaffirmations from the world around us, right? None of these are, right? Last battle on earth, maybe a little bit that one, the mood of a warrior battling power. Certainly they can be expressed in any language, but they aren't specifically like the gate of power or not doing the ring of power. None of these have any history in Spain, in Spanish, or even in the Mexican culture in general, right? So we have to understand this, that there's this a uniqueness to what Don Juan is bringing that isn't tied to a cultural milieu, right? Yeah, right. Yaqui homeland is in Mexico. The four communities I know about in Arizona all come from Mexico. Yes, but it's again, this is Carlos's point here, and Don Juan will make this point very clear later on, that Yes, he happens to be a Yaqui, but what he's doing is not a Yaqui thing. And that's the point, because Carlos got into big trouble about this. Yes. And that's
Hmm.
why, if you look at if you go and buy reissues now of the first book, they've removed the subtitle. For the longest, when I bought the books, it still said a Yaqui way of knowledge on book one, right? The teachings of Don Juan, subtitle, a Yaqui way of knowledge. They've removed that. It's not there anymore. So he's saying, right, um, that the cultural milieu, right? He hasn't placed Don Juan in a cultural way. So far, I have made no attempt whatsoever to place Don Juan in a cultural milieu. That's not really true, Carlos. You did so, but inadvertently and mistakenly, right? So now he's clarifying. He's correcting his. Yeah, yeah. Joseph, that is an erroneous assumption. It seems like that, but this is what I am trying to make very, very, very clear. Yeah. Just because you are physically in a place doesn't mean you are extracting from the cultural milieu. No. It doesn't mean things originate or connected from there. I created my own philosophy and own psychology. It has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with my cultural milieu. Zero. Because my cultural milieu was an excessively, obsessively Christian milieu. Nothing in my philosophy and my psychology connects to that. It is in no way religiously based or focused. Yeah. So and it's that cultural milieu. Forget the Christian side, right? It was an obedience culture. Obedience culture. That's what I grew up in. That was the main thing. Obedience, 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 obedience. That didn't affect my thing. I was the only logic that determined my philosophy and psychology that I create, my way of living, my techniques, was sensibility, was personal value. How did it add to me? How did it enhance my awareness? That was the only determinant. The cultural had nothing to do with it. I would, I created it myself because I was in a bubble and I had to, right? But later on, when I read all the classics, I saw, okay. I saw elements and similarities, like with Don Juan. I saw similarities in the cultures all over the world. You know, if I were to rewrite this book and I placed Don Juan, and instead of being Indian for Native America, I put Indian for India and just change Sonora to some desert in India, it wouldn't make any difference to the story. Don Juan had been in India. You would quite happily assume that, oh, he's getting all the stuff from Buddhism and all that. He is getting it from his lineage, who figured it out for themselves. Doesn't matter where they happen to be. The logic was the goal that determines what happens, right? That's the point. They went beyond the cultural, way beyond, to the point where there's no similarities. And to want to say, oh, it's because of this. This is a mistaken logic. And I get this, I used to get this all the time. People say, oh, well, what were your influences? They just assume I wasn't influenced by anything. I created out of need, because I had this understanding of awareness and that I was unaware. And I was horrified at my own unawareness, right? And the pursuit of awareness was my need, my drive, my power. Likewise, they had a need and a desire for more. His lineage ancestry, not his cultural ancestry. None of that came from the culture. It came from the desire. So we have to be very careful. We want to make these associations, but there are people who have done this, who have taken Don Juan's things and connected it to Jungian stuff, for instance, and connected it to Buddhism. Yeah, there's overlaps with. It's fascinating reading, right? There's overlaps with so much Western mysticism, and I haven't seen anybody do it with African mysticism, with sangomas and that. But you'll find the same there too. the key point is there are things that you find in Don Juan that you do not find elsewhere. Yeah. And so where does that come from? They're not part of the culture, right? This whole idea, just we'll see. We'll see as we get there. So we have to really understand that. We all sit on the shoulder. No, Joseph, we do not. Sorry. This is a false assumption. We all sit on the shoulders of giants. No, sorry. When I was a boy, I had no idea of giants or that you are referring to. None, zero. The only giant there was the Bible. I certainly did not pull any of the things that I developed from the Bible. This understanding of appropriateness, which I had at age 6, appropriateness as a conception, yeah, it didn't come from anything to do with my culture whatsoever. The only thing I could say is it was a carryover from some previous awareness or a simultaneous memory from the future. I don't know. I have no idea where it comes from. There's no way I can say it came from anywhere. I struggle with this because people all say, well, where did you get this from? Where did you get this from? I was asked this a lot. And I kept trying to figure out where. And I got to the beginning and I said, sorry, it was just there, right? Just an understanding. And I figured stuff out too, right? I calculated stuff, Joseph. I'm not taking what somebody else is doing and extending them. I invented stuff. I created stuff. So this idea that we have to be influenced, you must have gotten it from somewhere. Where in that logic is creativity? I see this all the time. People assume creativity is taking something from somebody else and distorting it in some way. Well, where did the original person get it from? See? No. Creativity, you can create something new, completely new, right? Now, I certainly did reinvent the wheel many times. I created many new things as well in my whole path. But certainly I reinvented the wheel many times. Does that make my creativity or creating it from scratch any less? No. When you reinvent the wheel, it means you are creating something from scratch. Doesn't matter if somebody else has done it at all. We assume influence when it's not always there, right? It's very, very important. Furthermore, for me, it is very, very important that we are able to create it from scratch. To me, a philosophy, a way of living, something that you're going to use. And my philosophy is all practical, usable, valuable, nothing to do with theory and stuff like that. If you're going to absolutely be able to use it, the ability to create it from scratch has to be there. That's my conceptuality, to develop the tools that allow you to create things from scratch. I don't share beliefs. I'm not a preacher. I do not wish to be a preacher. I have no intention for doing this or to, say, here's what it is and just follow me. No, this is just completely against my own mind. I'm sharing what is valuable to me. But what is the most valuable is the tools that allow you to build. In other words, I'm not saying here's a house and, come and live in my house, or this is the ideal house. Build your own house that looks like this. No, here are the tools. Build your house that serves your purpose, that gets you to where you want to go. Yeah, or a vehicle maybe. Yeah, doesn't matter what the vehicle looks like, how it works. If it's getting you to where you want to go, that's what matters. The tools that enable you to do that, that's what's important. And those I figured out for myself, right? As I only came to all of the classics after I had developed my stuff, not before. Right? My reading of the classics didn't start my journey, it was an end. And really the point and purpose of that made me aware of how much was missing in the classics, how much was absent. Right? And if you really pay attention to what I'm sharing, you'll see I've plugged the holes that classic philosophy, classic psychology don't address, right? I mean, one such is appropriateness. It's not anywhere in all of those classics. And it's such a duh when you get to it, right? So, Akashic record, interesting. I'm not sure. I only know of this Akashic record via somebody I knew very well who had a dream about them. But other than that, I don't know what they contain. Yeah. All right, let's continue, Beena. No,
Okay.
sorry, but before you go there, I want to make this clear. In Moreness-Culture, so Joseph, to put everything that Beena and I are doing in context, Beena and I are doing a capital R reading of this. Not to say what this is all about, which is valuable to us, but that's not the objective. The objective is the sharing of Moreness-Culture and capital R reading. We are going to take this and connect it to the broader connectivity of Moreness-Culture. And Moreness-Culture is all about learning, growing, the pursuit of awareness, the pursuit of Moreness, character development. For that, you need tools, not beliefs. Right? Moreness-Culture is not a belief system that you follow. No. No. Moreness-Culture is a system, it's a workshop that where you can find tools and figure out how to use the tools and get assistance in learning to use the tools. It's all about the tools. Right? It's a workshop. It's not an endpoint. It's a workshop. Yeah. Not even a
Okay.
library. It's a workshop. Does that make sense, Beena, as an analogy?
Oh, yes.
So we are doing this to illustrate, to demonstrate one of the profound tools of Moreness-Culture, which is capital R reading, which is looking at the more, looking at the connections, taking from that, using it, making it our own. Yes, thinking it through to the end, perspective shifting. We are demonstrating and sharing the usage of the tools that comprise Moreness-Culture. Is that what we're doing, Beena?
Exactly.
Very important, very important. So it's very helpful, Joseph. Keep in mind our objective here, right? If you don't know and you're just coming in here us reading, you might assume, oh, we're reading this stuff because it's useful, it's interesting, it's valuable. That's not our objective. Our objective is to share Moreness-Culture, not Don Juan's culture or Carlos's story. We are going to use this and pull value from it, of course, because there is a lot of value. But the objective is to share the tools that enable the extraction of value. Right? That's our objective. All right.
Yes.
Brilliant.
I have maintained the practice of referring to that system as sorcery, and I have also maintained the practice of referring to Don Juan as a sorcerer, because these were categories he himself used. Since I was capable of writing down most of what was said in the beginning of apprenticeship and everything that was said in the later phases of it, I gathered
Voluminous, yeah.
field, yes, voluminous field notes in order to render those notes readable and still preserve the dramatic unity of Don Juan's teaching. I have had to edit them, but what I have deleted is, I believe, immaterial to the points I want to raise. Okay, immaterial to the points I want to raise. In the case of my work with Don Juan, I have limited my efforts solely to viewing him as a sorcerer and to acquiring membership in his knowledge. For the purpose of presenting my argument, I must first explain the basic premise of sorcery as Don Juan presented it to me. He said that for a sorcerer, the world of everyday life is not real or out there as we believe it is. For a sorcerer, reality or the world we all know is only a description.
All
For
right.
the
So
sake
let's take hang on, let's just take this sentence here. Yes, and let's put it into an Indian context. Both Buddhist, Hindu, Vedic are going to say they won't use the word sorcerer. Yeah, but I don't know what the actual word is, right? But a sorcerer there is like a lesser mage. Yeah, something like that. I don't know what the exact term for it is, right? I mean, the term here that Don Juan is using is brujo, the Spanish word, right? So I don't know what the equivalent for brujo in the subcontinent is, but they certainly are. But it doesn't have the sorcery connection. I mean, there's a Buddhist text that is the lesser powers of a mage, I think it is, or the powers of a lesser mage, and it has the all-seeing eye, the all-hearing ear, walking on water, etc. So like 10 of them, right? And the point of that, it's just it's in a book called Buddhist Scriptures by Christmas Humphreys. It's fascinating reading, yeah. But so what I'm saying is, in a cultural context, all of what Carlos refers to, or Don Juan calls sorcery, is is all of it is there in India, in different places, in different ways. All of it, except it's not called sorcery. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
got a different name, a different term. It's not really focused on just powers, abilities, but because they don't lose sight of the overall objective, what's particularly in Buddhism, right, which is nirvana, total absolute
Hmm.
freedom. Yes, they don't lose sight of the
Hmm.
objective, and that's why in those Buddhist scriptures, it is the lesser powers or the powers of a lesser mage. I forget which way it is. It's not seen as a be all end all, right? And it's very important to understand. So really, the sorcery thing is just a term, and when we understand conceptuality, it changes everything. That's why I keep emphasizing it. So somebody, I don't know what your comment is here, dude. Seriously, uh, is it appropriate? Does your comment have anything to do with what we're saying? I don't get it. I
On
mean, I don't even
YouTube?
understand. Well, no, somebody's in on YouTube. Their comment is $sign ad color technology get some. It does. They're obviously advertising something, dude. Not
Yeah.
only is your comment inappropriate to what we're talking about, but as an advertising comment, it is inappropriate because I have no clue what it is you are trying to advertise or sell. So your advertising is thoroughly ineffective. It's just confusing. And if you're going to be that poor in communicating, I don't want to be doing business with you, even if your product is valuable, right? So you're just doing yourself harm, right? You're telling me do not connect to this person because they can't even share what they're about effectively. Yeah?
Yeah.
So if your product is valuable, I'll find somebody else to do it through, not you. Yeah,
Yeah.
appropriateness, right? I mean, if you are now going to be spamming, do at least do so appropriately. Yeah, not be making it worse. I mean, seriously, dude, seriously. Anyway, all right, please continue. So, all right, so this point of sorcery stuff, it's not unique to Don Juan, right? This is sorcery elements pretty much worldwide. Okay, you'll find it
Oh,
in
it
all
is. It
cultures.
is. It is. It is. And there is a very strong and very sophisticated, very well organized system in
Yeah,
spirituality, which
right.
is again, it is not limited to the religion, like a specific
Yeah,
religion in Islam, because the spirituality system is more of like kind of an independent from religion,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they have
Correct,
like okay,
correct, correct.
like in Zen or Buddhism, uh,
Yes.
the the different level or degrees of those things, and they have designations also,
Yeah,
which is not in hierarchy sense, but also just to like okay, different people have
yeah,
different
yeah,
abilities and all that, and
yeah,
there are many names also which I'm aware of it, like
yeah.
okay, Ghaus, Qutub, Abdal, Wali, and Qalandars, and
Right.
these are different designations they have, and these
Yeah.
people also like okay, they as far as I remember it, I don't know, maybe I'm not correct, but there are always 14 kutubs. Kutubs is a word in this world who actually manage the whole system. This is what they
Interesting.
are saying.
Interesting.
And
Yeah,
yes, there is
yeah,
always one. So
right.
and also the calendars, calendar is a very popular term. You can search it also. These people are
Yeah,
like okay, more than a sorcerer, because um, they have a very completely different understanding. And there was one woman also, Rabia
yes.
Basri. Rabia Basri, she was also a Qalandar, and
Interesting.
she was the one who says that I'm going to burn the heaven, and also I'm going to just what is the word for to stop the fire? What is the word for
Yeah.
that? I don't know that.
Douse the fire.
Yeah, and she says that I'm going to task the hell also, because
Wow.
people are doing everything for the sake of like okay, for the with the fear of punishment, and for the
Yeah,
sake of like okay, in
yeah,
some greed of getting something. So
Exactly.
she,
Exactly.
her,
Exactly.
yes, so
Exactly.
her teachings
So,
were about to get out of this
yeah.
idea of getting punishment and be scared and all that. So
Yeah.
even for the religion and religious idea, even though she was Muslim, but she says
Right.
that okay, no, I'm going to do that. So I'm just hearing that these people
Right.
had some abilities. Again, stories, I
Right.
have no other proof of that, and these are just
Right.
heard stories, so could be totally wrong. But they say that okay, people saw them on different places, and they can
Yeah.
actually influence physically, influence things in completely different part of the world when they were there. So these are the, or and they could be true, of course, as
Yeah.
sorcerers. They know things and they can make things for you also. So it's, this is not limited to Indian culture only. It is also limited in subcontinent. It is also in Far
It's
East.
all over the
It,
world. It's
yes,
all over
it's
the world.
China
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see a lot of things. So yes, but different
Okay.
way of doing
So,
things.
yeah, just to put a bit of a greater uh, perspective on things, right? Moreness, bring some moreness to this, which is what we're doing. Yeah, the term sorcerer, it is one of many, and in English, right? You've got just real quick: alchemist, charmer, clairvoyant, conjurer, diviner, enchanter,
Wow.
magician, medium, necromancer, occultist, seer, shaman, soothsayer, sorceress, thaumaturge, warlock, witch, augurer, fortune teller. Let's
Yes.
go some more. That was just the start. I didn't go into the full detail of it, right? There's more. Now, my point is, I mean, they didn't even have mage here. Yeah,
Hmm.
mage, M-A-G-E. My point is,
Hmm.
there are these fine distinctions. Today, we don't know what the difference is between a wizard and a mage and a sorcerer. But at some point, when those words came about, they got distinguished because there was a distinction, right? Which means
Hmm.
at some point in our language, these terms were more regularly used. They were more commonly in use. And there was a need to make a distinction. Yeah, there's a big implication.
Yes.
We are looking at our history, particularly Western history, and much of what we get even from the East has been sanitized by religions because religions are very threatened by alternatives, whatever the alternative is. And when something like this, all of this stuff that has to do with sorcery, wizardry, alchemy, whatever, I mean, alchemy was never really against the church, but just because it was something new, different, not understood, it got made into this great big evil, right? I mean, alchemist, if you look it up in some context, it's seen as a negative, evil term, but this is just the church. So we have a lot of the understanding. All of Don Juan's stuff that he shares about sorcery has been sanitized from Western literature and other cultures likewise by religion, right? It's been removed.
Hmm.
It's been removed. And it's a hidden knowledge because of this pressure from the church. Very important to understand. But when you look at this, there's a great history of it all around the world. And like I said, in India, in the subcontinent, in Vedic tradition, Buddhist traditions, etc. You see all of this, it's there, but it's not called that. And because it's not called sorcery, well, whatever. It doesn't have that big negativity. The church never got really anti-Buddhism as a evil thing if they understood that.
Hmm.
But that's just how things are. People's conceptions, their attitudes are determined by conceptions, right? And words are ridiculously powerful. That's why this term sorcerer, and we're going to see here now, right? That Carlos is starting to, later on, he's going to get even more clear about this. That it's the term Don Juan used, and Don Juan will later says, well, I don't really have a better term, right? So we're going to see this, but let's not get stuck there. Simply because Don Juan is using this term because he doesn't have a better one. It's part, a part of all of Don Juan's sharing and knowledge. Part. It's not all of it. It is a part that has overlap in all parts of the world, the sorcery. Every single part of the world has this, right? Almost all. I don't know of any cultures that do not have some form of sorcery involved in culture in some way, right? To greater and lesser degrees, of course. All right, I think we'll stop there. It's this exciting stuff. There's a lot here, right? And this introduction is very important because it is resetting things and it is getting to where we, from a Moreness-Culture point of view, are coming to be. Because we don't want to get stuck in lessness like sorcery. It's a lessness, not a moreness. It's a dead end. It is superiority paradigm looking to materialize itself. Right? It's a desire for power. That's what sorcery is all about. Yes, some way to have power that doesn't involve physical dominance, singular dominance, where you can have power over many, where you don't have to fight. There's only so many you can fight. Right? This is it. It's insecurity that is driving sorcery at its root, at its base. Right? And all of the things of sorcery basically are to have information and knowledge that others can't get. So you can, like Don Juan said, defeat your enemies, deliver. It's all about this superiority paradigm nonsense. But it's a massively complicated, very dangerous realm because the people who are involved in it all have this distorted psychology. They have the sickness of the superiority paradigm. But it goes nowhere, right? It goes nowhere. Let's just keep that in mind, right? So the whole sorcery thing is just a way for Don Juan's higher objective to break the certainty that reality is the reality. That's the point of it. We mustn't assume that the alternate reality is more important simply because he's presenting it as an alternative. That's an assumption I see people make many, many times. That the goal is the alternative reality. Okay, so you go to the alternative reality and then what? What do you do there? It's just another reality that's more complicated than the one you were in. What actual value does it bring you? Doesn't. Okay? So this is me,
Yes.
I think to the end. Right? There's a Moreness-Culture. This is Beena. Beena also thinks to the end. We are looking at the overview. Yes? This is the point of Moreness-Culture. Moreness. We say, well, what's the moreness involved in sorcery? Now it gets a bit lame. Yeah? Or
Yes.
whatever you want to call it. And that's why Buddhists recognize this. They call those powers the all-seeing eye and the all-hearing ear as this designated as a lesser power. Lesser power. And the point of that scripture was to say, don't get stuck here. If you get stuck in these powers, you'll never get to nirvana. The Buddhists recognize this. Yeah? Where in other sorcery cultures, they do not recognize this, right? Particularly in the West, right? Because they are so obsessed with the superiority paradigm. Everybody is. It's in everywhere. Like in Zen, you look at the Zen hierarchy of where you are at. Oh my goodness, they got so many titles. It's crazy. The whole hierarchy of Zen as you get hierarchy. So superiority paradigm shows its face everywhere. Yes. But when we unhook from that, this is what Moreness-Culture is all about, as an alternative paradigm so that we aren't infected and influenced inadvertently, right? Very, very powerful stuff. Very, very powerful stuff. So what we are doing in reading this, right, doing the capital R reading, is to illustrate these nuanced points, these points that we so easily make via assumption. To assume that this is a Yaqui way of knowledge or an Indian way of knowledge. It's a universal way of knowledge, right? Sorcery, it's universal, but it's a path, right? The end goal isn't unique to Don Juan either. Yeah, all religions share the same end goal. Yeah? All of them. Yeah, they may express it differently, but they all express the same end. All philosophies that are thorough have the same. So it's a universal.
Oh, yes.
And that universality is what we are focused on, right? And you can work this out yourself, even though that end goal was never expressed in my Christian upbringing, or at least they attempt at making me into that, right? I never subscribed to it, but at least in the culture, it was never expressed as the end goal that it actually is. was never preached. I never heard it, right? But later I said, oh, okay. I refigure it. I can see that, right? In other words, total freedom, which is the goal. Nirvana, in other words, that is very clearly made so, right? And there's other terms for it too. But also being one with God, it's the same thing. Yes, same thing. But being one with God was never ever preached when I was a kid. Even though it's there, it's part of the religion, it's never preached. All right, we have to go. We have to go. I'll be back in a second.
Okay.
As you close up.
Okay. So yes. Okay. So now what is happening with book three, starting book three, is actually that we are going back in a retrospective, and now Carlos is sharing us what he was thinking and what were his assumptions, and giving us some understanding from a different perspective. And of course, in a more precise way, that, okay, yes, this is how the things were and why he was thinking something like that. It is always important, of course. Syl is an anomaly. That, okay, he had a different, of course, from the very beginning, as far as I know. But normally, usually, what happens with people, that once we get into things, we get overwhelmed by the newness of them. This is what happens with everyone. That first we get impressed by the newness of any perspective, any idea, any culture, anything. The newness is like having just a cream of everything, because this is on top. But of course, when you get out of, like, okay, get past through that, and then you start getting the real stuff. So this is how I think that it was not fake. I'm not saying that, okay, it is fake, but this was a different thing. So first, it was a newness of everything. He was struggling. I can see that okay, for me, my understanding, that he was struggling to understand so many things. And Don Juan was sometimes he was not giving him, like, a bit of information, missing information for him, or detail, because it requires a bit of trust from his side. That, okay, when you are getting into some completely different reality, you need to have trust in your intent, that I am getting into something new, which is going to be beyond my understanding,
Yes.
which is going to be
Yes.
above and beyond my whole idea of how the world works, because it's about the new reality. It is like really completely shattering his worldview. But of course, as we all have share this defense mechanism, Carlos was also trying to understand things. How actually human, okay, I can talk only about human, how we understand something by getting some data from where this thing actually exists. So what Carlos was doing, he was trying to get some data. And what data was like, oh yes, Don Juan is also a human being, okay, a normal person. Yes, he has some really different vibe or something, but still he's a normal human being like me. He belongs to a different culture. So what Carlos was doing, trying to understand things based on data which he was perceiving through his senses, usual senses.
Yeah.
That was the problem, to understand something which is completely beyond your ordinary usual senses. And that was the struggle right there. And again, this is how I think that, okay, every new idea, we resist a lot to any new idea and perspective. It is hard to
Right.
understand that. Like we are
Right.
like we are having problem with understanding with the Moreness, with sharing. What's the difference between sharing and touch?
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
we are trying to understand things with available data, obviously available data, and
Yeah.
this is how things are not going to be. So
Yeah.
Moreness and sharing and all the concepts from Moreness-Culture, they are a bit beyond the usual senses and things. Not like a completely new reality, but definitely a different dimension of existence, the different
Exactly.
dimension of being.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yes, it is confusing sometimes. It is a stress. It's a
Yeah.
struggle. That, okay, what is different, because we are trying to understand it by comparing with already existing and established ideas. That's the problem.
Yes. It's a
And
problem, but also a benefit in that
exactly.
when you look at those, you can see the limitations. Yeah?
Yes. And this
Right.
is what I personally feel that what Carlos was doing at that time. But now
Yeah.
it is, we are going, it is exactly like you, when you read some novels, very interesting. They start with some incident, something happened. And then you don't know that, okay, who these people are, who is actually sharing the story. And, but they just keep that event. And then after a few, like, okay, couple of chapters, then you will say, oh, there's that person who was someone. And then they share the background and everything. This is exactly how Carlos has written those books. And now he is saying that first, to understand that what was happening, to get engaged with that, what was happening, what's new in this. Exactly like some novels, very wonderful novels. I have read some. So, and I like that. I
Yeah.
like that because first we were engaged. If Carlos would be trying to share his whole biodata and Don Juan's biodata, who would be interested in?
Yeah.
Some mostly people would say, oh,
Yeah.
okay, whoever. But he shared very cleverly, very smartly. He shared something very engaging first. If it is the
Yes.
way he shared, which is
Yes.
very, very
Yeah.
interesting. I like that because now he is giving us. Now we are completely hooked. Now we
Yeah.
want to
Exactly.
go
Exactly.
on.
Exactly. It's just the universe's magic to get us hooked. All right.
Yes,
Beena, I want
yes.
to add to what you're saying. Very
Okay.
importantly. Yes.
Yes.
We have to understand culture.
Hmm.
And what we absolutely have to understand are the limitations of culture. Culture typically means something that's traditional, something that's entrenched, something that's habitual, something that happens inadvertently, that is combining, and that adds cohesion, right? And that you ascribe to or subscribe to
Hmm.
or join or do, that makes you a part of a culture. Now, one of the major things of culture are tradition. Now, some things are tradition where it's really spelled out, and okay, traditional part of your culture, like let's say with the Bushmen, the traditional dancing, for instance, okay,
Hmm.
which they didn't
Hmm.
really practice in their daily lives, but when people came, okay, here's the traditional dance, that sort of faded. It wasn't something that they did anymore. At least the
Hmm.
Bushmen that I knew, right? Just make sure. I can't speak for all Bushmen. I can speak
Hmm.
for one group, but I'm just using it as example, all right, or traditional way of making bread or whatever. Many traditions aren't in use anymore, but there
Hmm.
are many traditions that do stay and are traditional, right? For instance, like, respecting your parents. This is a very strong traditional. Whether or not your parents deserve respect or not doesn't matter. You must respect them, right? Very strong tradition. Part
Yes.
of tradition and culture that's implied is the staying the same. Tradition comes about very, very slowly and very difficultly. Go against the tradition and you're in trouble, right? Going
Hmm.
against the culture, against tradition, very trouble, very difficult and cause you trouble. In other words, most cultures have built into their culture uh, conformity, obedience.
Oh, yes.
Very, this is inherent in the word culture, is that you subscribe, right? In other words, innovation, change, difference, when it applies to the culture itself, this is a no-no. This is a no-no, right?
Hmm.
This is something you want to get into trouble. Do things that are stretching the culture, saying, "Hey, let's do this differently. Let's not do it in the old traditional ways, or let's not do it the way we're doing it now, or the way we're doing it now is wrong." Oh my God! You want to get into trouble? Just say your cultural traditions or your cultural habits, your cultural practices are wrong. Forget about it. Moreness-Culture is the opposite of that. Moreness-Culture has, as part of the culture, innovation, change, growth, checking, testing, practicing. If this works, we do it. If it stops working, we stop doing it. We find something else. This is part of Moreness-Culture. It's taking the very opposite of what culture typically means and taking it into more, right? So this is a culture that's open. This is a culture that the culture is a culture of growth and change. Whereas most cultures do not have this as part. They are the opposite. They are cultures of stasis, right? Most cultures are cultures of stasis. You can get mini cultures, like say an artist colony culture, where they have, where there's in that private culture or an experimentation and invention, right? But
Hmm.
culture is the nest you were born in, says Joseph. Yes, exactly. Right? But this is not part of most cultures to treat it as a nest, which you have to leap from and on trust and then fly. No, most cultures seek to keep you in the nest. Yeah, they want to keep you in the
Hmm.
nest. So when we understand culture as a limitation, it changes because a nest is a limitation. Initially, it's very protective and very valuable, but when you get too big for it, you can't stay in the nest. You cannot stay, right? So very appropriate
Yep.
analogy, right? I mean, it's positive in the beginning, but it soon becomes a negative, right? I mean, if you want to stay in that nest and keep getting fed by your parent birds, they're going to say, oh, no, I'm not going to be taking care of you. And they're going to literally kick you out. And that actually happens in birds' nests. Some of the fledglings are reluctant to leave the nest and they literally get kicked out. They get shoved out. It's fascinating. It's quite fascinating. And that's my point. Right? When we understand culture as a nest, we also understand that it is limiting. Yes, at least it's positive to up to a point, but that's it, up to a point only. It's very, very basic, right? And after that, you got to figure it out for yourself. And when we can transcend culture, that's when we get to real value. Because culture, because of superiority paradigm, so endemic to all cultures, they seek to preserve. Superiority paradigm is ridiculously conservative. It doesn't like change. This is what conservative conserve, keep the same, conserve, yeah, keep the same. It's inherent in the terms. Why language and conceptuality is so important. When you understand, it's like, oh, I didn't realize that conservative means to stay the same. But think about it and look at people who are very conservative. They don't like change. Yeah, they want to conserve, keep it the same. And most cultures are conservative. Inherently, they are conservative. They're trying to stay the same. Moreness-Culture, quite the opposite. Yes, it is a transformational culture. It's a growth culture. It's a um, exploration culture. It's a determination practice. But it's not just, we're not just exploring for just, for whatever. No, it has a point and a purpose to it. And the core of it is character development with the end goal of freedom. Right? Moreness. We're always going into moreness. That's why the term moreness is so perfect. We're looking to develop personal moreness, and we are looking to develop moreness in terms of our evolutionary path. Yes, our endpoint, our goal. And it's very important. So I really want to make this point, and this is why Joseph. Uh, sorry, I called you Carlos for a second there. Sorry. Why Joseph? I make the point to unhook the deepness of what Don Juan is sharing from any cultural connectivity, because I don't want to have that baggage that goes with culture. Culture is a baggage. It's a nest, right? And that's it. It doesn't matter where, because somebody who's really, and I've seen this where people read Carlos via, let's say, a Jungian perspective. They're Jungians, and there's a guy who wrote a book about it. I forget his name now. You can look it up, right? Very fascinating book. But to him, he saw everything through the lens of Jung because he's a Jung disciple, he's a Jung follower, and Jung is the be all and end all. He got caught in the nest of Jung and he couldn't see the moreness. He lost a lot of the moreness. He connected it and it added a lot, but still limiting. And likewise with people who look at Don Juan through a Buddhist thing. I mean, there's so much overlap with Buddhists. Some people accuse Carlos of stealing from this and putting it into Don Juan's words and not acknowledging, cultural appropriation, in other words, right? Accused him of culturally appropriating Buddhism. Yeah. So when we do this, we get lost. We miss the forest for the trees. What is the forest? The real overall bigger picture. The bigger picture is actual real freedom. Does it matter where it goes through, which parts of the world, who live here? Does it matter what he created, what's original? No, none of it matters. What matters is what is practically valuable and useful. This is Moreness-Culture. Okay, where it comes from. It's totally irrelevant. And I don't want to get stuck in that because it puts a filter on the brain and we end up like the Jungian guy or the Buddhist guys or people from other things where they see things through that filter and they can't get past the filter. Yeah, I don't want to have cultural filters. No. No. That's why and again, look at the filter of the power plants, or the psychotropic filter, the hallucinogenic filter. So many people got totally into hallucinogens, right? Because of this. And today, even still, it's seen as the be all and end all of spiritual progression. It's not. Okay? And they get stuck there. They get stuck there. They don't go any further because of this filters. And I'm very, very cautious of this. Keep in mind always that part of Moreness-Culture is overview perspective. It is prime. It is one of the core conceptions in our dictionary of power. Overview perspective, seeing things from the universe's point of view, from the absolute total overall. Otherwise, you get stuck. You get up to a certain point and you don't go any further because you think you think your bubble is the everything. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And that's what culture is. Cultures are bubbles. Bubbles, 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 bubbles. Very limiting bubbles. Cultures, traditions, ways of some things aren't cultures necessarily, like Jungianism. It's not necessarily a culture, but it's still a bubble, right? It's become a bigger bubble later on as Jung's other writings came to fore. I mean, Jung was a schizophrenic, but this was hidden for the longest time. Now they released these schizophrenic writings. Fascinating stuff. But again, you're seeing it through a particular lens, a particular bubble. We want to avoid this, right? We want to try and get to develop an ability to be aware of lenses, right? And every time you collapse the bubble. You're in a bigger bubble, but then you collapse that and you're in a bigger bubble. That's the point. You keep collapsing, right? And this is the point. Stopping the world is collapsing the overall bubble. Okay? That's what we're about. Never lose sight of the objective. Never lose sight of the objective. Right, Beena? Make sense? Beena's on
Yes.
mute. While Beena,
No,
oh, brilliant. I mean, it's
yes,
important,
yes,
right? Not to lose sight of our overall objective, which is why
exactly.
Moreness, the concept of Moreness. This is my concept. This is something I brought into the world. Yes. And I'm not doing this from an ego point of view. I'm saying it specifically in the context here with Joseph, right? To say that this didn't come from anywhere. It's me putting two and two together. And in this case, the two is more and the suffix ness together. Moreness. Create something completely new that's not around. It's there by implication. It's a duh after the fact. You say, yeah, but it's kind of obvious. Yeah, but nobody else did it ever, right? And I'm only saying this because of this idea that we are influenced and we get things from somewhere else. No, we don't. Sometimes it's just Moreness came out of trying to express what it was that I was doing, and that was the only term for it, right? And Moreness-Culture is a culture where we are engaged in the journey through Moreness, not towards Moreness, through Moreness. We are already in Moreness. It's recognizing the Moreness and recognizing that a Moreness is a function of awareness. Yeah. And the more aware you become, the more Moreness there is. It's never ending. It's a fantastic, fantastic point, right? And we want to get to that point where we are fully able to appreciate, enjoy, and connect to the entire Moreness of the universe. Very powerful. I'm going to say real quick hello to the people on IG. Samantha Barnes, good to see you again, Samantha. I'm keen to hear more from you, Samantha, by the way. Digital deals, I don't know if that's promotion or somebody who's actually following the content. Duskatari, I know, likes the content. Digital deals says, where are you talking? Where are you from talking? And I don't know what the and is, but we're from Nobilia. Yes, and the culture of Nobilia is Moreness culture. Right? We exactly what I was talking about, digital deals, in terms of the limitations of culture. We are from our own culture. Our historic culture is not a factor. It's not a factor. Yes, not a factor. It doesn't matter. So for me to say where I'm from is giving you misinformation because it's not representative of who I am. It's going to give you a wrong idea. Okay? Very important to understand. Very important to understand. I cannot say that. I mean, I also say I'm from the internet. That's, if you don't know, Nobilia, it's something, it's a part of Moreness-Culture's law, as it were. Yeah. Uh, but it's just a place where Moreness-Culture is practiced, taken to its maximum. At least tried. Yeah. All right. Anything to add, Beena, before we go?
No, I was just adding at the end, but now we get another conversation about that after that. But
Yeah,
it's okay. It's all good.
yeah.
Yes. Okay.
It's
Thank you so much,
important stuff.
everyone, for
It's
joining.
important stuff.
Uh,
Important stuff. I will
yes, we are
repeat
keen
this
to.
many times, and so will Beena. The overall perspective that we are in, the milieu that we are in. We are in the milieu of Moreness-Culture, and which is an overview perspective culture. And we never forget that. If you do, you get lost. You get lost. Like Carlos got lost in book 1 and book 2, and he's going to get lost some more. But that's fine, right? And those people who wrote the books on Don Juan via the Jungian perspective or the Buddhist, whatever, they get lost in their bubbles. I don't want to get lost in a bubble, right? And this is the whole point of Stopping the World, to be aware that we are in a bubble. Okay, so everything I'm doing has a purpose to it, it's a point to it. Yes, not the idle points, not the superiority points, not the ego point, not any status point, none of that. No, it's a point of awareness. Huh? Very important. Yeah, Beena?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Very
Okay,
powerful.
so thank you so much. Please do make sure that you are leaving your presence bar there. That yes, I was there, because it is going to make algorithm more appropriate for you. Whatever you are interested in, they will give you more like this. So this is how the algorithm works, and your online algorithm is very crucial for your peace of being, because randomness and all sort of nonsense will not come into your news feed, and you will not get bothered by that. So it is the first very subtle step towards mindful living, towards moreness living, towards peace of being, is to train your online algorithm, because it is directly connected to your life algorithm. Please
Exactly.
pay attention to that, and pay attention wisely, because attention is the new currency. Okay, so we will see
Yeah,
you guys tomorrow. Bye for now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.